Each Friday, the elderly lady wordlessly deposited a container of baked goods on the steps of the postal building. No one inquired as to her reasons. No one expressed gratitude. The postal worker scarcely offered a nod of recognition anymore. For a duration of 8 years, she persisted unfailingly through precipitation, snowfall, and personal suffering. One autumnal morning, the earth quaked. A Blackhawk helicopter made its descent into her rear garden. A serviceman disembarked, clutching a discolored silver identification card, tears coursing down his time-worn countenance. Who could induce an elite military detachment to land merely to settle a debt of appreciation? Alice Campbell's hands lacked the steadiness they once possessed. Yet, at 71, she could still manipulate cookie dough with the skill that had rendered her renowned in Oak Ridge, Iowa. Her compact kitchen filled with the fragrance of vanilla and cinnamon as the morning sun streamed through aged gingham draperies she had fashioned decades prior. Widowed for 15 years following her husband James's demise from cancer, Alice resided alone in the unpretentious two-bedroom dwelling where they had reared their sole offspring, Michael. The wall still displayed his likenesses, from early childhood to elementary school pictures to his proud demeanor in marine dress blues. Michael had emulated his father's military career, serving with honor until 2007, when an improvised explosive device in Afghanistan claimed his life at the age of 23. After 4 decades of instructing second-grade pupils at Oak Ridge Elementary, Alice had retired to a tranquil existence. Her retirement income covered her modest expenditures, enabling her to contribute regularly to the local religious institution and volunteer at Sunny Pines Retirement Facility every Wednesday. However, it was her culinary creations that truly distinguished her within the community. Her pies had secured the county fair's highest honor for 11 consecutive years, and her Christmas cookies were legendary. On a brisk evening in 2015, Alice sat by herself, viewing the nightly news. A segment depicted soldiers stationed in Syria, young men and women in dusty uniforms squinting under the desert sun. One soldier, scarcely older than Michael had been, offered a diffident smile to the camera and remarked on missing his mother's chocolate chip cookies. Alice found herself overcome with emotion, her tea growing cold beside her. The young man's expression, that blend of valor and homesickness, had mirrored Michael's during his final video communication from abroad. The subsequent morning, she awoke with a sense of resolve. By midday, she had prepared 24 chocolate chip cookies and a dozen snickerdoodles, meticulously arranging them in a container lined with wax paper. She composed a brief message for someone distant from home. Remain safe. Alice C. At the post office, she requested the address of the nearest military installation. The clerk appeared taken aback but furnished the details for Fort Dixon, situated 40 miles distant. Alice remitted the postage without pause. Her educator's pension was slightly diminished that month. No acknowledgement arrived, no note of thanks, but the succeeding Friday, Alice reappeared with another container of cookies and another handwritten message. Week after week, she upheld her custom. One container burgeoned to 2, then 3, as she envisioned various soldiers receiving them. She never alluded to her son directly, but on each container she inscribed, "For those serving in silence." From a mother who once awaited her son. Not all comprehended her commitment. Martha Linden, her neighbor of 2 decades, shook her head one afternoon as Alice loaded cookies into her aged Buick. "Do you genuinely believe they consume all those cookies you dispatch?" Martha inquired, arms crossed over her garden fence. "You are merely squandering flour and sugar, Alice." At the post office, Debbie Henderson, who had formerly been Alice's pupil, now handled her parcels with a compassionate smile. "No one has expressed gratitude to you yet, have they, Mrs. Campbell? Individuals nowadays do not value things as they once did." Alice merely smiled. "That is not my motivation, Debbie." As months extended into years, Alice's Friday observance became as customary as church chimes. She never omitted a week. Not amidst the snowstorm of 2017, when she was compelled to excavate her vehicle from 3 feet of snow. Not during her struggle with pneumonia in 2019, when she baked while seated on a kitchen stool. And not even in 2020, when the world came to a standstill and the post office curtailed its operating hours. 8 years. 416 Fridays. 416 unreciprocated gestures of affection dispatched to strangers who wore the identical uniform her son had perished in. The benevolent often bear the greatest burden, Alice remarked to her feline companion, Sergeant, as she secured another ribbon around a cookie container. Yet, at times, it is the sole path they comprehend. In her 8th year of dispatching cookies, Alice's arthritis flared acutely one Thursday evening. Her fingers, engorged and painful, rendered the composition of her customary note arduous. The pen slipped, leaving an ink stain across the card. Too weary to begin anew, she appended a postscript, "My son cherished these before he perished in Afghanistan." That specific container journeyed further than most. Through a sequence of military postal transfers, it arrived at Forward Operating Base Horizon in northern Iraq, where Captain Neil Matthews was undertaking his 3rd deployment. The captain had been experiencing one of the most trying days of his military tenure. A mission had encountered difficulties, not disastrously, but sufficiently to cause him to question his command abilities. When the mail arrived, he nearly overlooked the battered cookie container intermingled with official communications. Something, perhaps the penmanship that reminded him of his grandmother's, compelled him to open it first. The cookies within were somewhat fragmented from their extensive voyage but remained edible. It was the smudged note that arrested him completely. "My son cherished these before he perished in Afghanistan." Matthews set the container down, his hands abruptly unsteady. 8 years prior, as a newly appointed lieutenant, he had served in Afghanistan with the 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, the identical unit referenced on the return address label of the box. With trembling fingers, he searched through his mobile phone until he located an old unit photograph. There, 3rd from the left in the rearmost row, stood Lance Corporal Michael Campbell. The memory overwhelmed him, the patrol, the detonation, the desperate medical evacuation that arrived too late. Michael had saved 2 other Marines that day by initially spotting the improvised explosive device and shouting a warning. His final words, uttered in a delirium of pain as they awaited the helicopter, had been about his mother's cookies and his promise to bring some for the entire unit upon his return home. Captain Matthews sat alone in his quarters that night, the container open beside him, pondering how many of Alice Campbell's cookies he had unknowingly consumed over the years, wondering if she knew that her son had died a hero, wondering if anyone had informed her that his sacrifice had spared other mothers from receiving the same devastating news she had. Back in Oak Ridge, Alice's quiet dedication was becoming the subject of unwelcome attention. A local blog post titled "Iowa Woman Self-Appoints as Soldier's Mom" suggested she was seeking publicity. The writer, who hadn't bothered to interview Alice, characterized her efforts as emotional performative patriotism designed to garner media attention. The post circulated among certain groups in town. Alice first noticed the change when Hammer's Hardware, where she'd bought baking supplies for decades, suddenly claimed to be out of the vanilla extract she requested. "Maybe try ordering online," the owner's son suggested with a shrug. "We don't want to get involved in anything political." "Political?" Alice had repeated, genuinely confused. "It's just vanilla, Peter." Even at church, where Alice had taught Sunday school for 30 years, people began keeping a polite distance. No one mentioned her cookie ministry anymore during prayer requests. The silence was subtle but unmistakable. Alice's grandniece, Jenny, visiting from college, noticed the shift immediately. "Aren't people supporting your cookie project anymore, Aunt Alice?" she asked over Sunday dinner. Alice carefully cut her roast beef before answering. "People have their own concerns these days. Doesn't it make you angry, after all these years?" Alice's smile held more sadness than bitterness. "I'm not angry, dear. As long as someone remembers Michael, that's enough for me." The following Tuesday, an unmarked envelope arrived in Alice's mailbox. Inside was a brief handwritten letter. "Mrs. Campbell, I served alongside your son in Afghanistan. Your cookies saved my life last week when I was contemplating the darkest choice a soldier can make. Knowing someone still cares enough to bake for strangers gave me the courage to seek help. Please don't stop what you're doing." Tucked inside the letter was something Alice recognized immediately, a worn Marine Corps emblem that had once belonged to Michael's uniform. She had thought it lost with his personal effects. Alice pressed the emblem to her heart and wept, telling no one about the letter. She simply added the emblem to Michael's memory box and continued baking. As winter approached, the local blog post resurfaced, this time accompanied by a video someone had surreptitiously recorded at the post office. In it, Alice could be seen carefully arranging her packages while a male voice off camera called out, "Hey, old lady. When are you going to realize nobody cares about your cookies anymore?" Alice's face in the video remained composed, though her hands trembled visibly as she completed her task. The video went viral locally, drawing cruel comments and mockery from people who knew nothing of Michael, nothing of Alice's quiet grief, nothing of the letter tucked in her Bible that proved at least one soldier had been saved by her consistency. Each Friday, despite all circumstances, Alice Campbell upheld her custom, combining ingredients, baking, wrapping, and dispatching. The calendar sheets turned, the seasons altered, yet her determination stayed firm. Her physician had advised her against excessive effort. "Mrs. Campbell, at your age, with your arthritic condition, this weekly baking endeavor is adversely affecting your well-being." Alice had merely offered a smile. "Certain discomforts are worth enduring, doctor." Each assortment of cookies bore an unseen element, recollections of Michael's early years when they would bake in unison on overcast afternoons, his adolescent phase when he would surreptitiously take cookie dough from the mixing bowl, his final leave prior to deployment when he had assisted her in refining a novel recipe for snickerdoodles. Each meticulously fastened ribbon conveyed a mother's ceaseless affection that declined to view mortality as its termination. "As long as soldiers are stationed away from their homes," she remarked to Sergeant the Cat as she secured another ribbon, "there ought to be someone who recollects their significance." On a particularly frigid Friday in November, Alice awoke with her joints protesting vehemently. The arthritis that had been her companion for years had intensified, and the meteorological forecast indicated snowfall by afternoon. Nevertheless, she eased herself from her bed at her customary 5 a.m., resolute in maintaining her schedule. By mid-morning, she had concluded her baking, but found herself contending to transport the cookie containers to her vehicle. The initial box eluded her grasp, plummeting onto the kitchen floor. Cookies dispersed across the linoleum like fallen soldiers. Alice sank into a kitchen chair, momentarily overcome. For the inaugural occasion in 8 years, she contemplated omitting a week. Jenny, residing with her great-aunt during her collegiate recess, discovered Alice seated amidst the scattered cookies, weeping silently. "Aunt Alice, perhaps it is time to cease," she proposed gently, kneeling beside her. "You have performed sufficiently. No one would hold you accountable." Alice wiped her eyes with a flour-dusted hand. "Once a week," she uttered, her voice more robust than her physique suggested. "It provides me with a motivation to rise early." Those straightforward words pierced Jenny's heart. She assisted Alice in tidying the disarray and insisted on conveying her to the post office. Throughout the town, sentiments towards Alice had become more severe. Some perceived her as an obstinate elderly woman clinging to an unwholesome fixation. Others viewed her as soliciting attention. Few comprehended the profundity of her dedication or the private sorrow that propelled it. The subsequent Thursday, Alice readied her cookies as customary, though she required Jenny's aid in packaging them. That evening, she rested fitfully, her dreams populated by Michael's mirth and the distant drone of helicopter blades. Friday dawned lucid and chill. Alice was partaking of her morning tea when the initial tremors agitated her china hutch. The sound intensified from a remote pulsation to an unmistakable, cadenced throb that vibrated her windows. "Aunt Alice," Jenny called from the upper floor, "something is transpiring outside." Alice proceeded to the rear veranda just as an immense Blackhawk helicopter descended into her unassuming backyard, its potent rotors contorting her aged apple tree and propelling fallen foliage into swirling miniature vortexes. Neighbors emerged from adjacent dwellings, some still clad in nightwear, all displaying expressions of incredulity. Mrs. Linden stood with her mouth agape at the garden fence. Further down the thoroughfare, an individual was already broadcasting the unprecedented event live. As the rotors decelerated, 6 uniformed servicemen disembarked in flawless formation. They were attired in formal dress uniforms, their medals glinting in the morning sun. The foremost officer, a captain bearing the name Matthews on his uniform, held a wooden plaque. Alice remained motionless on her back steps as Captain Matthews approached and executed a sharp salute. "Mrs. Alice Campbell?" he inquired, though he evidently recognized her. Alice nodded, one hand clutching her cardigan shut against the helicopter-induced wind. "I am Captain Neil Matthews, ma'am. I was the final surviving member of your son's contingent in Afghanistan." The words struck Alice with the force of physical impacts. Following 15 years of silence regarding Michael's military service, 15 years of official correspondence, perfunctory condolences, yet no personal links to his concluding days, Here stood an individual who had known her son in those ultimate moments. Captain Matthews proceeded, his voice audible to the expanding assembly of observers. Mrs. Campbell, 8 years prior, you commenced dispatching cookies to deployed military personnel. What you could not have been aware of is that your cookies reached members of your son's former unit on numerous occasions. He paused, visibly moved. Last year, I received a parcel containing a smudged note mentioning your son. It was then that I comprehended your identity and what you have been undertaking all these years. Alice's legs grew weak. Jenny hastened to her side as Captain Matthews disclosed the complete account. Before your son perished, he spoke of you. He recounted how you would bake cookies for his entire Little League team following every match, irrespective of the outcome. He vowed that upon his return home, he would bring your cookies for everyone. The captain's voice quavered slightly. Mrs. Campbell, without even realizing it, you fulfilled your son's final promise. A collective gasp emanated from the neighbors congregating at the perimeters of Alice's yard. Even Martha Linden pressed a hand to her mouth, tears coursing down her face. The last package we received arrived precisely on the anniversary of an operation in Kandahar where 3 of our men were saved because of intelligence your son had provided. We were holding a memorial service when your cookies arrived. It felt like Michael was there with us. Captain Matthews gestured and the other soldiers stepped forward, each holding something. A folded flag, a shadow box containing medals, photographs of smiling soldiers holding cookie tins. Mrs. Campbell, over 8 years, your cookies reached military personnel in 7 countries. They were shared among units who never knew your name but felt your care. They arrived during the darkest moments. Holidays away from family, after failed missions, during sandstorms and firefights. He presented the wooden plaque, elegantly engraved, Alice Campbell, Mother of Honor, for unwavering support of American troops, 2015 to 2023. This isn't an official military designation, ma'am. It's something greater. It's a title given to you by over 3,000 service members who have been touched by your kindness. From inside the helicopter, another soldier emerged, carrying a large, leather-bound book. As he approached, Captain Matthews explained, "This contains messages from everyone we could find who received your cookies. Some wrote pages, some just signed their names. All wanted you to know that someone noticed, someone remembered." The book contained hundreds of entries. Photographs of soldiers eating Alice's cookies in dusty outposts, handwritten notes of gratitude, stories of how a simple cookie had brought a moment of home to hellish circumstances. A reporter who had arrived with the growing crowd called out, "Mrs. Campbell, how does it feel to be recognized like this?" Alice, still supported by Jenny, considered the question carefully before answering. "I never wanted recognition," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I only did what any mother would do. I kept a promise my son couldn't keep himself." Captain Matthews nodded. "That's why we're here, ma'am. Not just to thank you, but to let you know that your son's spirit has been with us all these years. Through your hands, his promise was fulfilled." The crowd had grown silent, many wiping tears. Among them stood the hardware store owner who had denied her vanilla extract, the church members who had distanced themselves, and somewhere in the back, the blogger whose cruel words had circulated through town. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across Alice's yard, something shifted in Oak Ridge. A quiet recognition of how thoroughly they had misjudged the elderly woman who had never sought attention, never demanded acknowledgement, never stopped believing that small acts of kindness matter, even when they appear to vanish into the void. In the days subsequent to the Blackhawk's arrival, Alice Campbell's existence underwent transformations both profound and understated. News vehicles stationed themselves on her thoroughfare, and national morning television programs solicited interviews. Alice rejected them all with the identical gentle resoluteness she had exhibited throughout her life. "I did not undertake it for the television cameras," she informed Jenny. "I shall not commence now." Without ceremony, Alice persisted with her Friday custom. Yet now, with unforeseen assistance, provisions materialized on her veranda. Premium vanilla from the hardware establishment that had formerly refused her, butter and eggs from Martha Linden's poultry. specialized chocolate dispatched from as far afield as Belgium by a soldier's appreciative parents. The town's industrial kitchen at the secondary school was made available for more extensive baking endeavors. Alice accepted these gestures with equanimity but maintained her insistence on the individual element. Each cookie must be crafted with diligence, she clarified. That is what elevates them beyond mere sustenance. Behind the local church where Alice had engaged in worship for many decades, a modest commemorative garden was founded. At its heart stood a bronze tablet, the Campbell Cookie Ministry, because love travels further than we know. In Alice's kitchen, time-worn symbols acquired deeper significance. The aged tin container labeled Michael Forever 23, which had once held photographs, now contained scores of military insignia, commemorative coins, and small mementos sent by grateful servicemen. Beside her flower receptacle stood a folded American flag, not Michael's, which remained in her sitting room, but one that had flown over a base in Iraq, where her cookies had once provided solace. Oak Ridge Elementary School, where Alice had instructed for 4 decades, instituted an annual Campbell Kindness Day, imparting to youngsters that minor, persistent acts of benevolence could alter lives in manners they might never observe. 17-year-old Lily Peterson, who had formerly regarded the cookie lady with disdain, discovered her viewpoint transformed subsequent to witnessing the helicopter's arrival. I previously considered Mrs. Campbell eccentric, she confessed to her companions as they baked together for the local retirement facility. Now I deliver cookies to Sunny Pines each Friday. It is as though she imparted something to us without uttering a word. Lily was not singular. Throughout Oak Ridge, individuals commenced to recognize occasions for unobtrusive service. Not for acknowledgement, but merely because it was requisite. Alice had shown that persistence surpasses ostentation, that fidelity is more significant than fanfare. On her kitchen wall, Alice displayed 3 straightforward, framed quotations that encapsulated her life's creed. Benevolence requires no acknowledgement, yet is invariably recalled. Not all who act rightly are recognized, but they invariably leave an impression on another's existence. She required not that they recall her name. She merely desired that someone consume a cookie and recollect they were not forgotten. Perhaps the most profound alteration transpired during the town's Veterans Day observance, where Alice had formerly stood in solitude at Michael's memorial. Now, scores joined her, many bringing homemade cookies to share in his remembrance. Captain Matthews reappeared, on this occasion accompanied by several members of Michael's unit, to stand beside the mother whose kindness had reached them from afar. As winter descended upon Oak Ridge, Alice found her arthritis somewhat alleviated. Whether due to diminished stress or the warmth of newfound communal support, she could not ascertain. She persisted in baking, continued dispatching parcels, continued embodying the quiet example that had, against all expectations, resonated globally. "Do you ever wish the recognition had come sooner?" Jenny asked her one snowy evening as they packaged cookies together. Alice considered this, her hands moving steadily despite their age. "The timing doesn't matter," she finally said. "The cookies were never about me. They were about remembering Michael, remembering all the Michaels still serving, remembering that no one should feel forgotten." As I have composed Alice Campbell's narrative, I continually find myself pondering, if the world possessed but one additional individual like her, would the anguish of conflict be lessened? Amidst frigid judgments, she opted for quietude. Confronted with despairing anticipation, she chose action. How many among us have performed rightly without ever receiving thanks? I have contemplated Alice's story for days now, reflecting on how contemporary society frequently lauds the most vociferous voices, the most theatrical displays, the moments that achieve widespread online circulation, while disregarding the unobtrusive persistence that genuinely transforms lives. Alice never pursued acknowledgement. She sought a connection to her son's memory, to the young men and women who experienced the existence he had forfeited, to a purpose exceeding her sorrow. There is a profound quality in her 8 years of silence, something we seldom observe celebrated in an era of immediate reward. Alice Campbell serves as a reminder that authentic kindness is not a staged event. It is not marked with hashtags or captured in photographs. It merely endures, day after day, irrespective of recognition. I wonder how many Alices reside in our midst, individuals whose quiet contributions pass unnoticed until some dramatic disclosure compels us to perceive what was consistently present. The retired educator who provides complimentary tutoring to struggling pupils. The neighbor who clears everyone's walkways before sunrise. The anonymous benefactor who sustains the community refuge. The hospice volunteer who provides companionship to the terminally ill when no family remains. I peruse every comment you contribute, and I am aware that thousands among you have embodied someone's Alice Campbell. You have acted rightly when it was inconvenient. You have given when no one was observing. You have persevered when all others had desisted. We require no certificates of commendation. We require no widespread online acknowledgement. We need to believe that acting rightly generates ripples we may never perceive, just as Alice's cookies traversed continents, touching lives she would remain unaware of until that Blackhawk landed. There are individuals who perform benevolent deeds in silence. There are individuals whose names are never mentioned in news reports or social media updates. There are individuals who serve without anticipation of recompense. And there are cookies baked not for renown or followers, but for solace and connection. Perhaps we all ought to inquire of ourselves, what cookies are we baking? What consistent kindness can we offer? What promise can we fulfill for someone who is no longer capable of fulfilling it themselves? Alice's story is not merely about a mother's affection or a soldier's appreciation. It concerns the potency of unwavering dedication to a straightforward act of kindness and how such dedication can, against all improbability, ultimately be acknowledged and esteemed.